Mass, serving and responses. After the priest has placed the chalice on the altar and opened the book, he descends to the foot of the altar. The server kneels at his left side. The priest says,
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Introibo ad altare Dei.
Ad Deum qui laetificat juventutem meam.
Judica me Deus et discerne causam meam de gente non sancta, ab homine iniquo doloso erue me.
Quia tu es Deus fortitudo mea, quare mere polisti et quare tristis in cedo dum affliget me inimicus.
Emite lucem tuam et veritatem tuam ipsa me deduxerunt et adduxerunt in montem sanctum tuum et in tabernacla tua.
Et introibo ad altare Dei, ad Deum qui laetificat juventutem meam.
Confitebor tibi incitera Deus, Deus meus, quare tristis es anima mea, et quare conturbas me.
Spera in Deo, quoniam adu confitebor illi, salutare vultus mei et Deus meus.
the server bows his head as the priest says,
Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto.
Sicut erat in principio, et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
Introibo ad altare Dei.
Ad Deum qui laetificat juventutem meam.
The server makes the sign of the cross as the priest says,
Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Qui fece celum et terram.
then the priest bows and says the Confiteor.
Confiteor Deo omnipotenti, Beate Maria semper Virgini.
When the priest finishes, the server bows towards him and says,
Misereatur tui omnipotens Deus, et missis peccatis tuis perducat te ad vitam aeternam.
Amen.
Then the server bows towards the altar, except for the words, et tibi pater and et te pater, when he bows towards the priest.
Confiteor Deo omnipotenti, Beate Maria semper Virgini, Beato Michaeli Arcangelo, Beato Ioanni Baptiste, Sanctis Apostolis Petro et Paulo, omnibus sanctis, et tibi pater, quia peccavi nimis cogitatione verbo et opere, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Ireo precor Beatam Mariam semper Virginem, Beatum Michaelem Arcangelum, Beatum Ioannem Baptistam, Sanctos Apostolos Petrum et Paulum, omnes sanctos et te pater, orare pro me ad Dominum Deum nostrum.
During the Confiteor, the server strikes his breast each time he says mea culpa. He continues to bow towards the altar during the following prayer.
Misereatur vestri omnipotens Deus, et dimissis peccatis vestris perducat vos ad vitam aeternam.
The server now kneels upright as he answers,
Amen.
Indulgentiam absolutionem et remissionem peccatorum nostrorum, tribuat nobis omnipotens et misericors Dominus.
Amen.
The server bows slightly towards the altar during the remaining prayers.
Deus tu conversus vivificabis nos.
Et plebs tua laetabitur in te,
Ostenda nobis Domine misericordiam tuam.
et salutare tuum da nobis,
Domine exaudi orationem meam.
et clamor meus a te veniat,
Dominus vobiscum.
et cum spiritu tuo.
After the priest has ascended to the altar, the server moves to the gospel side and kneels on the bottom step. During the rest of the Mass, he always kneels on this step, opposite the side of the altar where the book rests. Now he makes the proper responses to the Kyrie.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison,
Kyrie eleison.
Christe eleison,
Christe eleison.
Christe eleison,
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Whenever the priest says Dominus vobiscum, the server responds, et cum spiritu tuo.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
At the end of each of the prayers, the server answers, Amen.
Per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
At the end of the epistle, upon the priest's signal, the server says,
Deo gratias.
Then the server changes the book, genuflecting as he passes the center of the altar. He stands at the gospel corner of the altar during the next responses, and with the thumb of his right hand, he makes the sign of the cross on his forehead, lips, and heart.
Dominus vobiscum,
et cum spiritu tuo.
sequentia Sancti Evangelii secundum Matteum.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
Then he goes to the epistle side at the bottom of the altar and stands. After the priest uncovers the chalice, the server brings the wine and water up to the altar on the epistle side. Next he offers the water and towel to the priest. Then he returns directly to his place and kneels on the bottom step at the epistle side. When the priest turns back to the altar after saying, Orate fratres, the server says the suscipiat.
Orate fratres,
Suscipiat Dominus sacrificium de manibus tuis, ad laudem et gloriam nominis sui, ad utilitatem quoque nostram, totiusque ecclesiae suae sanctae.
As the preface begins, the server makes these responses.
per omnia saecula saeculorum,
Amen.
Dominus vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo,
sursum corda,
habemus ad Dominum,
gratias agamus Domino Deo nostro.
dignum et justum est.
At the end of the preface, when the priest says the Sanctus, the server rings the bell 3 times.
Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus.
When the priest spreads his hands flat over the chalice, the server rings the bell once. Then the server goes to the top step and kneels a little to the right of the priest. During the elevation of the host, he rings the bell 3 times and also lifts the back edge of the chasuble. He does the same thing during the elevation of the chalice. Then he returns to his former position. Just before the Pater Noster, the server makes this response.
Per omnia saecula saeculorum,
Amen.
And at the end of the Pater Noster, he says,
et ne nos inducas in tentationem,
Sed libera nos a malo.
After a few moments, he makes these replies.
per omnia saecula saeculorum,
Amen.
pax Domini sit semper vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Then at the communion of the priest, the server rings the bell each time the celebrant strikes his breast and says,
Domine non sum dignus, Domine non sum dignus, Domine non sum dignus.
Then the server gets the communion paten and returns to kneel on the bottom step of the altar. When the tabernacle is opened, he says the Confiteor and responds Amen to both of the priest's blessings, just as he did at the beginning of Mass. He helps the priest to distribute communion and then returns to the altar. He gives the paten to the priest to be cleansed and kneels in his usual place until the tabernacle is closed. Then he gets the wine and water and brings them to the priest. After they are used, he removes them together with the paten. Finally, he changes the book from the gospel to the epistle side and returns to kneel on the bottom step opposite the book. He makes the usual responses.
Dominus vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo.
per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
Then the priest closes the book and goes to the center of the altar. He faces the people and says,
Dominus vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Then the priest says one of 2 things, to which the server's response is the same.
ite missa est, benedicamus Domino.
Deo gratias.
The server makes the sign of the cross as the priest gives the blessing, and then he stands for the last gospel.
Dominus vobiscum,
et cum spiritu tuo.
initium sancti Evangelii secundum Ioannem.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
At the end of the gospel, he genuflects with the priest and says,
Deo gratias.
at all low masses, he brings the prayer card to the priest and kneels beside him as he recites the prayers after Mass. Finally, he genuflects with the priest at the center of the altar and walking slowly leads him to the sacristy.